Hello everyone. I'm just starting the stream now. So it's been a little while. It's been 2 months since I've done a live stream. And hopefully I get to see some people coming in soon. And so what I'm going to be doing in this live stream, well, I'm talking about stories. Of course, Booktube is where we have stories, correct? Well, we talk about stories. But yeah, I think one of the most important things is that we are reading, but there's some other things. I would have to say real life has real stories. Now those can be pretty interesting, and I have a few stories I'd like to share, but we'll see if some people come in soon. Just started the stream and I don't see anyone yet. Of course, I only gave you 15 minutes notice for this one. But I can check if there's anyone on social media. Let's see if I got anyone on Facebook. Oh, there's someone watching. Hello. Who's there? Nope. And yeah, it's kind of hard to get responses on things like Twitter and Facebook when you only have 15 minutes notice. No, that's fine. Okay. So my idea for this, well, stream video output is low. Let me know down below if you're having any issues. I have a very fast internet connection, so that should not be the problem. I am suspecting this has more to do with YouTube itself. It's quite possible. So let me know. It looks like the streaming is really, really low. I got that little rotating circle on my screen. I may type something in the chat. Who's here? The stream is... no, the stream has a very low output for some reason. Oh, hello. Yes, you can call me Jay. That's fine. Oh, I'm trying to type something, but it's not going in. Okay, I asked, how's the stream output for you? Getting anything? Okay, so looks like you're getting something, but looks like it's really slow for me. It's not updating for me. Oh well. I can't really see much. Well, that's strange. I have it in 2 different windows. Let's close one window. I've never seen that happen before. Okay. That's probably because of my, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just my setup affecting it. But anyways, it's running. It should be running. So, what I wanted to talk about was stories. And, of course, I like reading fiction. I do like reading non-fiction sometimes. But there are many different kinds of stories I like, but I would say fantasy and science fiction are my favorites. I do like some historic fiction, though. Kim here. Oh, hello. Hi, Kim. You're here, I guess. So, what I'd like you to do, actually, in the chat, we're going to be trying to make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to be talking about some of my real life stories, and sometimes it does translate into a lot of the reading, not the reading, but the writing I do. So yeah, I'm hoping that we have some good conversations. But of course, if you have any questions for me, please ask. And let me just check something here. Oh, okay. Looks like the stream health is now good and now bad. I would say YouTube's to blame. Shouldn't be my internet connection because it's very fast, actually. Can usually upload a video very quickly. So let's think about some stories. Now, first of all, like I said, I like fantasy and science fiction. One of the books that I'm reading right now, actually, I'm doing terrible at reading right now, but I like stories in which we have a kind of adventure. You're traveling, you're going with people. Yeah, stream health flip-flops often. Yeah, this is the worst I've seen it, actually. Usually it's in yellow, not red, but it should get there. Maybe it's just the way it's showing. I don't know. But I've done mobile live stream only once. No, I think I've done it twice, actually. It worked okay. At least I think. But as I was saying, gotta stay on topic here. So as I was saying, I like reading books where there is a kind of journey. So fantasy is really big for me, as well as science fiction. And I like seeing different worlds in science fiction. It's a lot of fun. You haven't read anything since February. Sounds like me. Actually, I did read something this month. But it's pretty short. Short amount of reading. I've actually been reading a lot with my daughter, so I shouldn't say I haven't been reading. I've been reading almost every day with her. Or she's been reading to me. But she's learning. She's only 6. Hey, there's 3 people now. Who else is here? If you want to talk. Oh, down to 2. Okay. So, real life stories, though, I also like real adventure. If you don't know, I used to live in Japan, and one of the things that I used to do was exploring, just going somewhere and exploring the area. So I would take a train, go to some neighborhood, and walk around. But I've done something even more extreme, and that was walking. I think I walked 35 kilometers one day. The Book Thief. I haven't actually read that one. Yeah, and definitely, I like unique ideas. That is definitely a bonus, because you don't know what's going to happen. I do like traditional fantasy, like classic fantasy. That's fine. I find that those are comfort reads for me. But yeah, back to what I was saying about Japan. And this relates to a lot of the stories that I read. I like it when you have a journey from one place to another, and you get to see what's going on everywhere in between. And I have walked 35 kilometers from one city through several others to another along the coastline. And this is just south of Tokyo. And it took 8.5 hours of walking, but I was very sore at the end. But it was very interesting because I got to see a lot of things that I would never see by train or by bus. So these things were things that, I guess you could say, just surprise. And there were some things that I never expected, like there was a shrine by the ocean that I saw, and there was a big, like, Shinto shrines have these gates called Tori gates. Oh, just Tori, that means gate. It's a shrine gate, and this was out on a rock in the ocean, and I just found that fascinating, very interesting. But I'll get to some of that, but I just want to talk about the fiction that I like to read first. And yeah, I would say, well, for fantasy and science fiction, I have comfort reads, one for each. My fantasy comfort read, and Will, the bald book geek, is not going to like this, but I love Shannara by Terry Brooks. I find it to be one of those kinds of worlds that I like to get into, I like to visit often. But, I know it's cliche. It's very much, well, the first book is pretty much like Lord of the Rings. And a lot of people don't like that about it, but I found it familiar and comfortable, and in fact I read that book before I read Lord of the Rings, so I don't know. I guess I have a different experience then. But I just love getting into the world and seeing how things have changed over time. As for science fiction, that one is Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern series. And I know some people will say, but isn't that fantasy? But no, it isn't. Anne McCaffrey herself has even said it is science fiction, because it is. It's based on another planet that was colonized by humans. The dragons are genetically engineered. So it is very much science fiction. But it has that fantasy feel, because the first book that she wrote was low technology, and she made it seem like fantasy, but it is totally based on like science fiction, low resource world, so they couldn't maintain the technology that they had, so they had to revert to more, I guess, medieval style way of life. But if you read the series chronologically from within the world, it starts off very much science fiction. They arrive at the planet, they colonize it. And later on in the series, they rediscover the technology. So it is a very interesting series. Most of the books are low tech though. But again, it's very much a comfort read. Okay, so you did the same thing the first time you went to New York City, took the subway on the first day, and walked the rest of your time there. Yeah, definitely. I have walked so much in the Tokyo area. I lived in a city called Fujisawa, which is it's a seaside city. It has a beach that is considered, I guess, Tokyo's beach. It's the busiest beach in the entire country of Japan, and it gets incredibly crowded. A lot of people go there for surfing. And it has a, I guess you could say, a California feel to it, although I've never been to California. The neighboring city of Kamakura, which is very historic, it's an ancient capital of Japan, has so many shrines and temples. But the coastline there has a Hawaiian theme. There are a lot of shops there with Hawaiian goods and even Hawaiian restaurants. So it's a lot of fun. Night Fear, hello. How are you? And you've read some of the Pern books, yeah. I've read almost all of them. And I know there have been no new ones recently. Todd McCaffrey is supposed to continue the series, but he hasn't written anything. Not since his mother, Anne McCaffrey, passed away a few years ago. And yeah, interesting thing. She's American, but she lived in Ireland, and you know what? I would love to walk around in Ireland. It's just one place which I think would feel like fantasy. That and Scotland. I would love going hiking in both Ireland and Scotland. Maybe even Wales. Why haven't I mentioned England? Maybe England is just very built up, a lot of it. I guess some parts aren't. But anyways, things that I love about both Pern and Shannara are the world building and the fact that you can go to many different places and experience different kinds of things. Although I do find that the Pern series, not much in the way of variation for culture between the different holds. I was going to say towns or cities, but they're holds, and the wares where the dragons live. So things tend to be fairly uniform culturally. But I like going into worlds like Song of Ice and Fire, a Game of Thrones, I guess you could say. And I love the fact that there's so many different cultures in that. Oh, and Kim, thanks for joining. And I just like going around there and seeing all the different cultures, also different languages. I know you can even start learning High Valyrian on Duolingo, if you've ever heard of that. That seems a lot of fun. You love Anne McCaffrey's books. I haven't read the Acorna books at all. I know some of her other series. Oh, what is it? Live Ship Traders or something? I can't remember. What is it? I know it's science fiction, and I may read those eventually. Matilda Gothica. What are you telling about? We're talking about mostly Pern and Shannara right now, about how you can go around to different places in those worlds, and it kind of relates to in real life. We can visit many different places. But yeah, what I'd like to talk about is actually visiting real places, some stories, and if you have any really interesting stories, then please share it with me and we'll talk about it. And you can ask me about some of my experiences, even specific questions like, have you ever done this? Of course, I lived in Japan, so there may be some things that you might not know about, some very interesting experiences. But now I live in Canada, which is where I'm from. And last October, my wife and daughter and I went to the Rocky Mountains, and we spent just a couple of nights there. And we visited Jasper, as well as a waterfall, Athabasca Falls, and we went to, oh, what is it called? It was a ravine. Gee, why can't I remember it? We visited a ravine, which has waterfalls in it, and we can even hike down into it. Not really very many interesting stories, but we did visit a lake that was further up in the valley, and we encountered a mother moose and her baby, and we were able to get surprisingly close to them, but they were right by the parking area. Of course, we stayed away because, you know, moose are the biggest deer in the world, and they can be quite protective of their young. Yeah, they can be pretty scary. They're strong. But yeah, nothing really amazing. We did see the Milky Way one night. Absolutely clear skies. It was beautiful. But back to Japan. And yeah, in Japan, I did climb Mount Fuji. That was an adventure. So back in 2005, when I went to Japan, before I went to Japan, I did training in Vancouver, and then a couple months later, several of us met up in Tokyo. We had a day of just going around and, well, eating. And we decided we should all get together again and climb Mount Fuji. And we did. So we very late, actually. I shouldn't say very late. Early evening at the end of July. It's July 31st, 2005. Why did I go to Japan? I went there to teach English, to work, experience living in another country. I was just interested in Japan, and of course that's where I met my wife, and my daughter was born there, and we do plan on visiting many times, because that's where my wife's family lives, and I feel a very strong connection with the country now. I lived there for 11 years, so it's like my second home. If I have the chance, I would definitely live there again. And I would climb Mount Fuji a second time, which they say is crazy. People say you're crazy to climb it twice, but you have to climb it once. But anyways, we went to Mount Fuji by bus. Took it from Shinjuku, which is one of the main centers of Tokyo, and we arrived around 9:30 p.m. at it was 5th stage, so it's halfway up the mountain. We had to climb the rest of the way. So we got some supplies, flashlights. I forgot to buy batteries for the flashlight, so I couldn't use my flashlight until we got up to 6th stage, which had some shops, and I could buy a battery. But it was actually kind of interesting going up from the 5th stage to the 6th stage. It was just zigzagging up through forest, and then we reached the tree line, and then everything was absolutely desolate, just rocks everywhere. Now keep in mind it's dark, so we couldn't really see much, but we could see this line of lights going all the way up to the peak, and that was people with flashlights and headlamps, and there were spots where there were a lot of lights, and those were, from down below you'd think, oh, little towns or something, but they were just clusters of buildings where there were shops, there were places where you could sleep if you wanted to. And let's see, in my group there were there were 5 of us. Other than me, there are 2 men and 2 women. 3 of them I came to Japan with. The other one had been in Japan for quite some time already, and he is still in Japan. The others have returned to their home countries, which are Canada and the US. So the first while was kind of tiring, going back and forth, and then it got interesting, where it got steeper, and when I shined my light on the ground I could see it was red. And of course most of the rock on a volcano is iron, so it was rusty. Now I packed some snacks. I even had a bag of potato chips, which was a really bad idea, because the air pressure as you go up higher, it gets much lower, and my bag of chips expanded Like it blew up into this ball. It was like a balloon. And I was afraid to open it, because if I tried opening it, it would probably explode and I'd lose all the chips. And we're told, don't litter. It's not a good idea to litter. Yeah. So what I did was I had some other snacks. I think I had like pepperoni, I had beef jerky, stuff like that. I think I had a little Ziploc bag of nuts and stuff like that. Lots of water. And I should mention that water is very expensive on Mount Fuji. If you're going to buy it, very expensive. So pack lots, if you ever climb, of course. And it was a lot of fun looking up in the sky, because we could see the Milky Way. It was very clear. The weather was beautiful. And it was getting colder as we went up. I should mention that halfway up the mountain, it was about almost 30 degrees Celsius. It was hot. But by the time we reached the top, it was just above zero. So it's above freezing, but it was cold, so we had to dress warmly. But partway up, one of the members of my group was getting vertigo, altitude sickness, and she had to rest for a while. So one of the other woman who was climbing with us decided to stay back with her, and the other three of us, the men, went ahead. Now one of the other guys I was climbing with started getting vertigo when we were reaching the top, so he had to stop and rest a lot. But I was finding it hard to breathe as well, so I needed to rest. Then we reached the top, and about 20 minutes later the others caught up with us, so we were all up there. And we found a ramen restaurant, and we ate not very hot ramen, because water boils at a much lower temperature at that altitude, which was kind of annoying, because the noodles were still a bit hard, and everything tastes different up that high. And but it was nice to get something, nice to eat something. And we walked around the little tiny village at the top of the mountain, looked inside the crater of Mount Fuji, and then we decided to go down. The sun had already risen. We reached the top at sunrise, and that is what people like to do. They like to see the sunrise from the top. And by the time the sun had risen, it was cloudy all around, but we were above the clouds, so it was like we were on an island in a sea of clouds. We couldn't see anything else. But we decided to start going down. I should mention it took us 4.5 hours to get to the top, and then 2.5 to get down. The walk down, it was sunny the entire way, which was a problem, because we all forgot to bring sunscreen. And UV rays at that height are incredibly strong. So if you're ever going on a journey like that, be prepared. And if you're reading like fantasy stories, usually they're prepared, aren't they? At least I would think. But once we started going down, I noticed that the terrain looked a lot like we were on Mars. Everything was red. And I have some pictures of it as well. And it looked, quite honestly, I told the others, it's like, this looks like pictures from Mars. Okay. So it was quite funny though. One of the members, he shaves his head, so it was getting warmer. It was actually getting quite warm, so we were taking off our jackets. He wasn't wearing his hat. Yeah. They are not. What are you referring to? I'm actually forgetting what I said. Sometimes when I talk, I forget what I just said. But as I was going down, I was getting hotter and hotter, and I didn't even think about the sun. But when we got down to the tree line, that's about where the clouds were coming in. So we were walking through fog, and we got down to the bottom, not the bottom of the mountain, but back to the 5th stage where we started, and we ate curry at a restaurant there, which was pretty good, waiting for our bus to go back. And when we were on the bus, we noticed that we were all sunburned so badly. Oh yeah, that they're ready in fantasy books. Yeah, I guess they aren't. A lot of them definitely aren't. They just start their journey. Although in Lord of the Rings, that they were prepared. They made sure that they had supplies and they were ready to go. But yeah, a lot of others, they're not. They just leave. I know, I think it was the Wheel of Time, when they start off on their journey, they're running away at first, so they're not prepared at all. Yeah, things work out. Science fiction, though, usually if they're on a spaceship, they've got all their supplies with them, so yeah. Yeah, but the funny thing about with our sunburns was the other guy who had the sunburn on his head, his whole head was bright red. As for me, I was wearing a t-shirt, so my arms were sunburned pretty badly. My face was too. And when I got back to my apartment, it was early afternoon, and my arms were in so much pain, I decided to take a cold bath, and that was so comfortable. Never taken a cold bath before. And over the next week, the shirts that I was wearing at work were irritating my arms so much. It was very uncomfortable. I had to wear a suit. Of course, I wasn't wearing the jacket because it's too hot. In Japan, in the middle of summer, it's between 30 and 35 degrees and very humid. So too uncomfortable to wear a suit jacket. Definitely don't want to do that. But that's the Mount Fuji story. I do have other ones actually kind of nearby. Do you have any stories? If you're watching, let me know. If you're watching after, like, this is recorded, share your stories in the comments. That's always appreciated. So another one. This is, I would say, is not a very happy story, but it's a very surprising story. I never expected this to happen, but this is a pretty fun, well, not fun. It started out as a fun day. I was on a date with my wife. We weren't married yet. It was, were we living together at the time? I don't recall. No, I don't think so. No, this is before we moved in together. We were in Tokyo. We went to... Where did we go to? Oh, I remember. We went to Sizzler. We ate at Sizzler. And later on, as we're going home, she was going back to where she lived, and I was going back to where I lived, which we didn't live in Tokyo. We lived in complete opposite sides. She lived north of Tokyo, I lived south of Tokyo. And in the train station, we just got on the platform, and there was this guy who was talking loudly on his phone, which is not normal in Japan. And he was walking backwards, and he nearly ran into my wife. And she was annoyed with him, but we didn't say anything. We just went around him, and I just muttered under my breath that, people should look where they're going, or people should pay attention. And we went halfway down the platform, and we're just minding our own business, and then suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy walking towards us. And I didn't really think much of it. I thought he was going to walk past us, but he came right up to me, right behind me, and kneed me in the back of my knee. It was like a little tap. It was not strong. So I turned around, and he started shouting at me. Basically, what he was saying in Japanese was that I should get out of the country. I don't belong there. Like, get out. And then he kneed me again, very lightly, which I just found hilarious afterwards. I just couldn't believe that he would be coming up to me so aggressively and then just tapping me lightly. And then he didn't walk away. My wife pulled me away from him, and we left the platform, and just to get away from him, basically. Well, we went back up to the platform, and he was gone. He wasn't there. We stayed on total opposite end of where we encountered him, and we got on the train. My wife said that if she ever sees him again, she's going to kill him. And yeah, I had a lot of adrenaline pumping. So I'm not someone who fights. I've never gotten into a fight in my life. But if I had been maybe American military, which there are a lot of around Tokyo, he may have been hurting. But yeah, not uncommon there, people talking loudly on the phone. Yeah, it happens here in Canada too, but in Japan, because like, especially big cities like Tokyo, it is so crowded, people don't want noisy people. So if there are people being noisy, they were, I guess you could say, people give them a dirty look a lot. You see that on the train a lot. If someone's talking on the phone, people will look and they won't say anything because they're too polite. They're not going to say anything, but they will stare at them. I find that the worst people are elderly people. They will answer their phone and speak loudly. And people complain about young people in Japan, but it's usually the older people who tend to be the rudest. Like I've experienced some rude people, some people staring at me because, well, I wasn't Japanese. I was a white guy in a fairly uniform monoculture. Although in the Tokyo area there are a lot of tourists, so it's common for people to see foreigners. It's not uncommon. And the places that I lived, there were, like, I lived in Yokohama, which has a long time ago it had a foreign community. It still does. It has Chinatown as well, a huge Chinatown. But there is a fairly large foreign population in the area. And a lot of people from India and a lot of Americans. So I was often mistaken as an American. I would tell them, no, I'm not American, I'm Canadian. Yeah, but that was one of my other stories. It was an interesting one, to say the least. Never did really experience any overt racism in Japan. Maybe just 3 times. It could be just twice. That one time and another time, again, I was with my wife. We were taking a monorail to Odaiba, which is a very popular place where couples go on dates. They have a bunch of museums there, shopping centers, lots of restaurants. A lot of people like to go there. But we were sitting in the train, or in the monorail, and there was a couple sitting right across from us, and the man started speaking really stupid English. Basically whatever he knew, but he was obviously doing it in a mocking tone. He was basically mocking me. And he was pretty young too. I was quite surprised. Yeah, but out of 11 years, those are the only 2 incidents I ever had. Every other experience I've had with people has been very, very positive. Well, except for the drunk guy. The weddings. Weddings in Japan. Yeah, I didn't have a wedding, but the traditional wedding in Japan is usually at a Shinto shrine, and the bride gets dressed in a very elaborate kimono. It's absolutely beautiful, and there are many layers. I imagine having a summer wedding. She'd be so hot. The man dresses in a black kimono. The woman usually dresses in a white kimono, although there's sometimes color, but usually it's white. I've never been to a wedding in Japan, so I don't know much about it, but quite often people have both a Shinto and a Western ceremony. So, well, they'll have the ceremony in the traditional Shinto dress, but then afterwards they may dress up in a Western wedding dress and tuxedo, and they'll have a wedding reception, which is fairly common Western as well. Sign papers if not in a wedding? Yes, actually that's what we did. We just went to the city office, signed papers, and we were married. That's it. It took like half an hour or a few minutes. And after that we went out for dinner. We had shabu shabu at a restaurant that had really, really good beef. It was Wagyu beef, actually. I need a drink. Oh, this leaked earlier. Yeah, so I have never been to an actual wedding, but I have been to a funeral. Actually, I wouldn't call it just a regular funeral. It was 30. God, how many? Was it 30 days or 28 days after the actual funeral? You know, I can't remember the number of days now, but it was a 40-something. I have a video about it. It's on the main page of my channel. If you go down to my I have a Japan vlog. It's an 8 parts video series. There is one video in there where I talk about my experience at that funeral, and it's yeah, it was an interesting experience. I didn't take any video of it, of course, out of respect. I would never do that. Yeah, if you get married, you'd sign papers. Yeah, I think for us, I think mostly both of us are. We don't really like large groups. We said that if we do have a ceremony, we might like sharing our vows or whatever. We may have just a very small group if we do. But that remains to be seen. Yeah, funerals. That's something you don't really want to talk about going to very much. Don't want the mess. Oh yeah, and the cost. And I know, just the whole preparation is just so much, isn't it? And having to deal with, let's see, invitations, and then last week I heard on the radio, they said the average cost of a wedding is quite expensive, but for the guests, it's very expensive as well. If you're invited to a wedding, you're pretty much expected to spend lots of money. Logan Paul. I don't know about Logan Paul. I pretty much ignore him, especially after what he did in Japan. Yeah, so although I do have another story in Japan. This was just a month before we left Japan, and it was right around my birthday. My in-laws were planning on going to a hot spring resort. My sister-in-law, her husband, and their daughter were also planning on going, but they had a very young daughter who was just a toddler, and they just found it a little bit too much, too difficult to bring her. So they decided not to come. So I went with my wife and daughter, and we stayed at this just one night at this really nice resort hotel. It's a hot spring resort hotel, and we were served food in our hotel room, served dinner. It was very Japanese food, I should mention. It's some of the stuff I would not eat. Like I'm a bit of a picky eater. There are some things I just don't want to touch. But I had enough food. That was fine. And of course, the purpose of being in this hotel was to enjoy the hot springs, which we did. And like there are two different two different changing rooms and two different baths. One for men, one for women. So my father-in-law and I went into one, while my wife, mother-in-law, and daughter went into the other. And it's an interesting process. First of all, you have to undress, then you sit in front of a mirror with there were taps, and there was soap and cloths. You had to grab a cloth for yourself, and you wash yourself. Before you get into the bath, you have to be clean. So you have to wash off everything, including hair. And then after that, you can take your towel, which isn't very big, it's more like a cloth, and you walk into the hot spring, and you sit there. And they recommend that you don't stay in there for more than 10 or 15 minutes, because the temperature, I think, was 42 or 43 degrees, and that temperature can be, depending on the person, can be quite uncomfortable. it was pretty hot, I would say, because I'm not used to being in that temperature of water. And I sat there for a few minutes and I started getting lightheaded because the temperature makes all of the heat go to your head, really. And you have to be careful because you could get a headache, you could pass out. Definitely don't want to pass out in hot spring bath. So after that, I got out, then we went back up to our room, had dinner, and later on we could spend some time looking around. We didn't really go out, we relaxed. What did we do? We did explore the hotel. It was interesting. The lobby, there's a gift shop in there. There's an absolutely amazing view from the lobby. It's right next to the ocean, so we had a great view from there. And then my wife and I decided to go out to this public bath, and it was right on the beach. And this one was interesting because it's mixed. Men and women in the same bath at the same time. So that was the first time I'd ever been to a mixed bath. You know, everyone has to be naked in there, but everyone was wearing a towel. They just wrapped their towel around themselves until they got in the water. But we saw the moon. The moon was rising, and you could see the ocean. It was dark out, so you couldn't really see much. And it was a very interesting experience. And then later we went back to the hotel and went back to the hot springs for one last time for that night. Many times. Have to be you have to be naked. That's traditional. You never see anyone wearing any clothes in there. You're not allowed to be, and you have to wash, of course, because everyone shares the same bath water. And but you can wear the towel around you. That's okay. Yeah, so that first night we went. I went into hot springs 3 times. The next morning, before breakfast, went into the hot spring again. Came back up, had breakfast, and my in-laws booked a private bath. This hotel also had private baths, so my wife, daughter, and I went into this bath together, and it's open air. No one could see in it, but we had a view of the ocean, and that was great. We could also drink. There was I guess a kind of bar in there that had drinks. We didn't drink alcohol. Alcohol's a bad idea if you're in a hot spring. And then after that, well, we had to leave because checkout time. But we ended up going to this restaurant outside of the hotel. It was pretty good. Mostly noodles. And then we went to the alligator farm. Not alligator, alligator and banana farm. I don't remember what it was called, but there were alligators, lots of alligators in there, and lots of banana trees. And it was like a giant greenhouse. There were many different greenhouses where you could see a lot of different kinds of plants, mostly tropical, and it was quite beautiful. And then we went home, and that was it. So that was that was one of my last memories of being in Japan. Last adventurous memories. Of course, I spent a lot of time visiting different places, not so far from where I lived, but when we go back to Japan, we do plan on visiting a lot of different places, so I look forward to that. And I would also say that we'd visit other countries. One of the first places we want to go is Italy. We also want to go to the UK. I personally want to visit the UK, Ireland, Germany, and Norway, which are countries of my ancestry. So that would be a lot of fun, I think. Also want to visit New Zealand, Australia, Hawaii, Costa Rica. If I go to Africa, I'd like to go to Namibia. I think that would be interesting. And if I go to Southeast Asia, I'd like to go to Vietnam. Mostly because I really like Vietnamese food. And here in Edmonton, you can see this is Edmonton Oilers. They didn't make the playoffs. But there are so many Vietnamese restaurants here, and I love it. So I'd love to visit Vietnam and experience the food there. That would be great. Any other places in East Asia? Probably Taiwan would be great to visit. South Korea, especially for food. Korean food's great. I'd like to go to Hong Kong too. If I was really adventurous, a really adventurous place that's not so commonly visited. Tibet might be interesting. Bhutan. It's hard to go to Bhutan though. Kenya might be interesting too. Actually, I would love to climb Kilimanjaro. That's not in Kenya. That's in Tanzania, I believe. But that would be fun. I'd love to go to the top of Kilimanjaro. I understand it's a several-day hike to get up there. And what else? Of course, around the U.S., Alaska would be great. I'd love to go to the Arctic. Canadian Arctic would be interesting to see. Oh, and I can't forget Iceland. That's one place I would love to see, especially with all the active volcanoes, the hot springs. The Blue Lagoon is supposed to be interesting. Greenland might be fun. That would be interesting. You're a city girl. Yeah, I do like cities myself. I like living in cities. I would prefer to live in cities. I'm from a small town originally, but I would probably never live there again. Visit, okay, but live, no. I like the convenience of cities and the fact that there are a lot of things to do in a city as opposed to a small town where there's not much to do. Yeah, so anyways, we're getting up to about an hour, so I think I'm going to probably end it at 1 hour. So thanks for watching. I know some people came in and dropped in. That was great. And for those of you who are watching this on a replay, you love the noise? Really? I guess actually we live under the flight path of the international airport here, so we hear a lot of jets. When we lived in Japan, we used to live under the flight path of the American and Japanese Air Force base. Actually, it was a Navy base. So lots of military jets flying overhead, so that was even louder. But it was interesting to see them. But anyways, as I was saying, I should probably end this live stream. And I've got a few videos in store for the next week. I'm going to get Author's Answer going. I would like to restart or start getting up some of my Japan videos again. Actually, the story that I have about the hot spring, that is one of the videos I need to do. But it's going to take a little while to get to that one. So I have a few from Kamakura, very historic places to see. Those are going to be coming. And a dinosaur restaurant as well. That was a lot of fun. Food portions were huge. The food service was slow, and we actually ate some of us had already finished eating by the time some got their food. So, I don't know about the service. The food was fine. But anyways, thanks for coming and thanks for watching. And yeah, sucks with the vlog thing. Yeah, the Veda, YouTube's not really pushing out a lot of the videos to subscribers. And I know one person I've talked to a lot about it, Will, Bald Book Geek. He's talked about it as well. He's had the same experience. A lack of views because subscribers are not getting the videos in their subscription feed. Happened to me. And I'm kind of wondering about this live stream. I only announced it 15 minutes beforehand, so yeah, what can you do? And here in North America, people are working. I don't work until this afternoon, so if I had anyone coming here, most likely it would be from Europe and Middle East, maybe Asia. East Asia, I'm not sure. No, it's probably middle of the night there. Well, hold on. Yeah, probably middle of the night there. Yeah, click the bell icon. You gotta do that. Yeah, it's evening. It's still morning here, and I'm hungry. I should eat breakfast. But anyways, thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. I'm going to say goodbye for now. I hope to have a video up maybe Sunday. That should be an Author's Answer video, and I might be doing a tag in the next week. But I should also mention that in May I'm going to be very busy because I'm taking a course for teaching English. Although I've already taught English for 11 years. I need to actually have this certificate to be able to teach English in Canada. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.